Thank you. Um, okay, right. It's always exciting when we're struggling. And we are so happy that God always provides. We'll continue our study in the book of Genesis. We've seen how Jacob struggled through 14 years for two wives. And then now he's going to struggle for another 6 years, total 20 years. And all this has to do with his uncle, the cunning, scheming, manipulative man, so much better than Jacob himself. Jacob thought he was the best schemer, the most cunning, until he met Laban. And today we're going to see these two men in a contest. I use the word con man, and con he was hurt, so he refused to come today. No, he was sick. It's not well. All right, before we begin, let's look to God in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you that you not only loved us, you gave us your Son. And through his life, we see your whole great plan of redemption revealed. And we thank you that we're part of it. We ask this morning that as we continue to look at the life of Jacob, and we know that Jacob is central in your plan. And we thank you that there are so many lessons, not just for Jacob, but for us too. We ask this morning that you help us to quieten our hearts and focus on you and hear your still small voice. So that today we'll be here looking more like Jesus. And truly that is our desire. And we ask this in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus. Amen. Genesis chapter 13, verses 25 to 43. Quite a big chunk, but it's all narrative, it's all story. So today, there won't be many slides, but there's some important ones, which you have to remember for our next study, next Sunday. So here we go. After 14 years, serving Uncle Balan, Balan, I want to say Balan, Laban. Let me compose myself. He was in Haran. Remember, he was in Haran for 14 years, for two wives, in fact, 4. And verse 25 picks up at the end of that 14 years. Verse 25 and 26 reads, after Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, send me away, send me on my way, so I can go back to my homeland. Give me my wives and children, for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I have done for you. Now it's interesting to note here that Jacob not only has got 4 wives and 11 sons and one daughter, Diana, at this moment, and he asked Uncle Laban to allow him to leave and return to his home in Canaan. Notice he did not say, my wives, my children, and my herd. He didn't say that because he didn't have any. The reason is very simple. Uncle Laban had him working for free for the last 14 years. How many of you have worked for free for even 1 year? How many of you have worked for free for 1 year? I mean, if you are a wife, then it's not counted, right? Your, your, your pay is in heaven. Your reward is there in heaven. We might be wondering, why could not Jacob just leave? Why did Jacob have to ask Uncle Laban for permission to leave? Now, it could be just culture, like today, when you are about to leave your parents' home, you say goodbye to your parents, isn't it? It's by way of information, and it is politeness to inform your parents that you are leaving. Or it could be just asking for his blessings before he leaves. Like in marriage. Today, when you want to marry a girl, you go up to the parents and ask. Not that you're going to have a no. You will not take a no because you all have already made up your mind. It is simply an act of respect. Jacob had an agreement with Laban for 14 years for 2 wives. And Jacob is now asking Laban to honor his part of his agreement to release Jacob according to the terms of the deal. Now, don't forget, Jacob was, in some sense, a servant. A servant. He was never a son. And in those days, if you're a servant, it's kind of you're bonded. You don't leave until you get permission. So these are some of the little things you have to bear in mind that goes on behind this story. For Jacob, it was time for him to stop working for Laban's success and time for him to start building his own future. 4 wives, 11 sons, 1 daughter. But Laban's plan all along has been to hold on to Jacob for as long as possible, forever if possible, because Jacob was an expert shepherd, not his son. His sons are lazy bums sitting under the tree picking their teeth. But Jacob was different. He worked very hard. So verse 27 continues. Verse 27 tells us, but Laban said to him, if I found favor in your eyes, please, please, please stay. Now, your translation only go 1 please. Mine also go 1 please. But I added that for emphasis. Laban was on his knees. And he continued. Verse 27, I have learned that by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. He has learned by divination, meaning some form of sorcery. He is a pagan idol worshiper. Now, whether the claim is true or not, we will never know. But what he said is true, that Yahweh has blessed him, even though he was crooked. And Laban was blessed because of Jacob. Now, that brings up a very interesting principle, which I want you to remember. Now, this principle is not something I cooked up, because we see this principle that God blessed Laban on account of Jacob. In the same way, God had blessed many other people in the Bible. For example, Potiphar. You remember how Joseph, when he was sold into slavery, Potiphar was blessed because of Joseph. We'll learn that later. And I can tell you that today, God has blessed me on account of Jesus. And God will also bless you, your children, on account of your godly life. So can I encourage you, even though today our children may be rebellious and they may walk away from Jesus, but don't give up. Continue to live godly life. God will bless them, giving them special favor on account of you. Back to Laban, that old crafty fox. Notice here, he used the soft approach. And he appealed to the kindness of Jacob, because he knew that he has prospered so far because of Jacob. And verse 28, this is what he was driving at. Verse 28, he added, name your wages, and I will pay them. Name your wages, and I will pay them. He knew all this while he didn't pay anything. But his hurt increased, he has prospered, and he's now willing to pay anything that Jacob demands. Big problem here. He thought that money can solve his problem. Much like many of us, we always think money can solve your problem. And you know it's not true. Anywhere you go, even your family, your friends, your relatives, your people at work will tell you money can solve the problem. But it's not true in Laban's case, because he was still trying to treat Jacob as an ordinary hired servant. And I think he was even willing to give him part of his inheritance. But we know later on that Laban will have his way. But 29 and 30 tells us, Jacob said to him, you know how I have worked for you, and how your livestock have fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household? See, Jacob was now only focused on building up something for his own family. And Jacob told him, right in the face, he said to his father-in-law that you have increased because of God. And ever since I came, your flock have increased greatly, greatly. But he said something that was pretty hurting. He said, when I came, your flock was miserable, miserable. But now, under my care, it has increased. Now, one thing to note here, and you must always never be fooled by people like Laban who uses the name of God, because Laban may acknowledge the blessings of God, but Laban wasn't interested in believing, in following the God of Jacob. He was only interested in increasing his material wealth, but he doesn't want God. Doesn't that remind us of many people we know, or even ourselves? There are many people who come to churches not because they needed God, but they needed to get rich. We have so many such people in our churches today, not just in the US, but here in Singapore. We have the health and wealth church goers who will believe as long as everything goes well for me, as long as I'm healthy and wealthy. That's Laban. That's Laban. And in a desperate attempt, in verse 31, Laban asked, "What shall I give you?" He asked. That's the first part of verse 31. What shall I give you? He was willing to give anything to keep Jacob back, even part of his own inheritance, like a blind check. But this would mean if Jacob were to accept an inheritance, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be something we would have? No, because if Jacob accepted the inheritance from Laban, it would mean that he has got to wait until Laban dies. And evil people live longer. Don't you agree? I've known a lot of good godly people who die early. Maybe that's the reason why I'm still alive. Jacob's not going to wait until Laban dies. And that may mean he will never return to his homeland, to Isaac, to his father, to the land that God promised Abraham. This time, Jacob was prepared for this crafty father-in-law of his. Second part of verse 31 tells us, Jacob said, "Don't give me anything." Jacob replied, "But if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages." Verse 33, "And my honesty will testify for me in the future. Whenever you check on the wages you have paid me, any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark colored, will be considered stolen." Will be considered stolen. Now, as I was studying through this, I was quite intrigued by these three words. In some of the translation, later on, you will have the word strike. Right? So there are three words. speckled, spotted, and striped. It's kind of a tongue twister. If you try to say it with me, speckled, spotted, striped. Ready? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Speckled, spotted, striped. You have to remember this because this is important in our next study. Right? Some of you are still not willing to be embarrassed. All right? Say it loud with me one last time. Speckled, spotted, striped. Now, I can say it quickly because I've practiced it many times at home. Now, in verse 32, there's one mention of dark color. That means in some translation, you have the word black. Black. So you and I know that most sheep that you and I see, say in New Zealand, most of them are all white. Am I correct? But when you look at goats, very few goats are white, but they are solid color. What we mean by solid color, meaning they are of one color. It could be brown, it could be black. The problem is that in every flock of sheep and goats, there will be what we call speckled spotted stripe. What are they? Before we get to that, Jacob said, you know that in all the herd, speckled spotted stripe are fewer in numbers. Is that not true? That is the case. Whether it's sheep or goat, they are very few in numbers. But those few, give them to me as my wages. And with those, Jacob intends to use that to build up his own herd. That was his proposal. And he says, if you agree, today I will go and separate them. Those few that are speckled spotted stripe will be mine. Now I'm going to show you some pictures. What do you mean by speckled spotted stripe? First, solid colors. What you see on your left, that's a sheep. There are many different breeds of sheep. This sheep is huge and it's not really, really tight. The one on your right is a goat. Goat can be very big, but there's a solid color goat. One color. Sheep is one color. I know in the past we've always had a lot of fun, and I keep asking, and you keep enjoying this question. How do you tell the difference between the sheep and a goat? There's some who say, oh, goats have got horns. You gotta be kidding. There's some sheep that have got huge, they call them big horn sheep. In Canada, right, some can be as big as a small little horse. And some of you white guys will say, oh, I know, goat have got goatee. Sheep got goatee too, right? So how do you tell the difference between a sheep and a goat? And then some of you know, anybody? How do you tell? They look almost the same. It's like kind of when Jesus said the wheat and the wheat, they look exactly the same. Sheep got wool. Goats have got precious wool too, right? They call it cashmere. Right? Huh? Goats got hair. Sheep got wool. Yeah, some, like I said, different breed. There are many different types. But if you look at this is not really wool. Sorry? The tail, exactly. All right. Look at the tail. The, the goat's tail is always sticking up. That's how you tell the difference. But the sheep's tail is always pointing down. Right? Generally, that is true. But there's some, maybe some, you can find some sheep with tail sticking up because that's a deformation. All right. That is the difference, people. And that's how God created us. Amazing. Even with this, God is telling us the difference between sheep and goat. You're in a church. If you're a child of God, you're a sheep. Your tail is pointing down. But if you're a goat, with your pride, your tail is pointing up. All right, enough of that. Speckle. Take a look. This is speckle. This is speckle, meaning patches. Right? Speckled meaning patches. There are some cows you see with patches too, isn't it? Those dairy cows and all that. They're called speckled. That's a solid color one. All right? Those are solid colors. But you can see here, they've got all kinds of combinations. So that's a speckle or patchy sheep or goat, and even cow. The next word is spotted. This is spotted. These are spotted. So that's where the difference is. You need to know because this is important for our next study. Now, speckled, spotted are always considered inferior because they are fewer in numbers. And the pure ones are considered superior. So Jacob is telling Laban, easy, I take the few that is inferior, that has got nothing. But the white ones are yours. The solid color ones are yours. And in the future, if you should inspect my herd and see any that is pure white or solid colors, it means I've stolen from you. That was his proposal. That was his assurance to Laban. And it sounded like a good plan because Laban understands all this too. That those who are speckled, spotted, and striped are always fewer in number. But there's one thing you need to notice also with Jacob's proposal. There is no timeline. No timeline. And that suited Laban because how is Jacob going to raise a flock big enough to make him rich? Almost never. And Laban was smart. You think we Singaporeans are smart or the Hong Kongers, Hongkies are smart? Laban is so sharp. The Jews are so sharp. There is no timeline implying that Jacob may be working for him. Definitely. That pleases Laban. But Jacob, on the other hand, has got no plans to work for Laban forever. There's something that Jacob knew that Laban doesn't. So both men are now locked in a contest, each thinking that they have a better deal. Don't you think so? Always when you get into a deal, quietly at the back of your mind, there's something you know, and you say, And the other guy look at you and say, you dummy. That is what we have here between the two men staring down at each other. Jacob is going to raise a huge flock in a short period of time, but Laban just doesn't know. So why? We ask the question, Why did Jacob make such a proposal that doesn't favor him? And we'll find out the answer in our next study. But Laban, in order to keep Jacob working for him, agreed readily. He said, agree. Let it be as you have said, verse 34. And it was highly unusual for the master scammer to agree so quickly and give in so easily without haggling for a better deal. Why? Because Laban, the old party fox, has got a plan in mind already. And we read that in verses 35 and 36. Verse 35. That same day, he, meaning Laban, removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his son. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. What did he do? Laban himself, even without waiting, straight away separated those that are speckled, spotted, and striped. So gave them to his sons, sent his son on a 3-day journey away from home to care for that which now belongs to Jacob. So 3 days journey are those speckled, spotted, striped. Few, but they're 3 days away. Meaning they won't be able to mix them up. The male won't be able to mate with the white ones to produce speckled, spotted, striped lambs. That was his master move. He thought that he had Jacob by the throat. He thought that he has already outsmarted Jacob, because now there won't be any more interbreeding of any speckled, spotted, striped with the pure and solid colored ones. How on earth is Jacob now going to get his wages if he didn't have any of his speckled, spotted, striped male goats for breeding? Now, I don't know whether you are familiar with genes, genetics. Sometimes even in the plants, we call it GMO, genetically modified organism, so that you get bigger fruits, tastier fruit that is resistant to any pest. Let me give you a quick lesson in genetics. You and I know that the physical features of animals, humans included, are decided by our genes, in our DNA. Be it the color of our hair, our eyes, whether we're tall or short. I've got tall genes, it's just that it didn't come out. All right? And that we call recessive genes and dominant genes. Couple of terms. Oh, sorry. This is the striped one. Striped one. Okay, like zebra. Now, we may laugh at all this, but all these two types today in the farming community, they are known as Jacob's sheep. Jacob sheep. I'm not kidding you. We call it Jacob sheep. All this, whether it's speckled spotted stripe, they're all called Jacob's. So stripe is very rare, very rare. And how do they come about? It's all controlled by the genes. And if you have a parentage that's mix of European and a Chinese, the Chinese dominant gene is black hair. I would be worried if my son, his hair comes out blonde. For the Chinese, the dominant color is black. It doesn't mean that in our genes, there are no other colors. There are. The other colors are called recessive. Recessive. So this would help us to understand how certain group of people, they may migrate to a certain area, and over a long period of time, hundreds of years, they keep breeding inwards, right, amongst themselves. Then that gene that may be recessive now becomes dominant. So that's how it works. So you have the word dominant and recessive genes. And then you have the word permutation. Within the genes, there are many combinations. So I'm not very tall. Evelyn is taller. So comes out Ned is taller. He's got Evelyn's genes and looks. My looks. Sorry. And these genes over time can mutate, meaning it goes into some structural changes. Structural changes. Maybe good, usually bad. And because of this mutation, because of the recessive genes that is in all of us, sometimes a child comes out defective, or we call it aberration. That means unusual. The common ones we see today is a person who comes out completely white. We call it albino. Albino. So there are many different of birth defects, many types of birth defects. And these are just examples of one. And that has to do with our gene. So two normal looking Chinese can have an albino kid. We carry all this in our DNA. All the information needed to determine how we grow is all there. Now, a pure white sheep has in its DNA recessive genes, meaning it has genes that can produce speckled, spotted, or striped. All right. So today, if we were to put two pure white sheep together, they can produce a black sheep. That's how we get black sheep. A good example is the Black Panther. How many of you don't know what's a Black Panther? We're not talking about the terrorist organization. This Black Panther really is a leopard because of the recessive gene from the parrot. You can see this Black Panther. This guy is more obvious. You can see the spots on the body. But he's a Black Panther because he's black. The other one is not so obvious. He's more black than the one on the left. And even no matter how black it is, if you go close enough, you can see the spots on the body. in a Black Panther. And this has to do with the dominant and recessive genes. So sometimes you will see two leopards walking together. One is a normal spotted leopard, the other one is completely black. But they're siblings. Siblings. So in a sheep, one that is with solid color, white. So white is the dominant gene, and black is the recessive gene. So to put it simply, once in a while, you're going to get a speckled spotted stripe or a black sheep. But if today, if you were to get two speckled spotted sheep and mate exclusively with each other, the animals produce, the babies that come out would probably be dark in color, speckled, spotted, and striped. But over time, if they keep inbreeding, it will become the dominant breed. It will become the dominant. So with this understanding, we now come to a strange passage, a difficult passage that's full of controversy. Because there are many Bible commentators that would say different things. But let me read it to you first. Verses 37, 38, and 39. Jacob, however, took fresh cut branches from poplar, of almond, and plane tree, and made white stripes on them by peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. Then he placed the peeled branches in all the watering troughs, so that they would be directly in front of the flocks when they came to drink. When the flocks were in heat and came to drink, they mated in front of the branches, and they bore young that were streaked, speckled, or spotted. Streaked is in the NIV, it would be the word stripe. Stripe babies, or speckled, or spotted. So the big question is, what's going on here? What was Jacob doing? And like I say, you can find many different comments, different views from different commentators. But most of these views do not really give you a credible explanation or answer, but only a few good lines. Because as you read, you'll find them pretty funny. They range from superstitious practices to mythical forces. Mythical, meaning grandmother's stories. If you would remember in our younger days, at least I do remember, when a woman is pregnant, she'll take the wedding ring, tie it on a string, and then put it over her hand. And if the ring spins, then you're going to have a boy. If the ring goes swing like that, you're going to have a girl, or one or the other. That's an old grandmother story. Today, you might hear of some mothers when they are expecting. What do? Look at photographs of beautiful babies. Maybe better Angmo babies, come out like Angmo. No, not that they're bad, but that's what they do. I'm not kidding you. They do that. And some would even go on to do other strange things, which should not be mentioned here. Many will make the connection. Many of the commentators, they make the connection between the appearance of the branches that has got stripes, so that when the animal looks at it, the babies come out striped. As if the animals can reproduce and be influenced by what their eyes saw when they were drinking. Or that Jacob could have heard that this bark from the trees contains certain chemicals that would cause the animals to go into heat and then reproduce like an aphrodisiac. Like these are some of the funny things that has been suggested, but they are all highly unlikely, because if it was true, Jacob would have required a lot of such chemicals from the tree to bring about the same effect. But there was something else that Jacob did. Verses 40 to 42 tells us Jacob set aside the young of the flock by themselves, but made the rest face the strict and dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flocks for himself and did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the stronger males were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs in front of the animals, so that they would meet near the branches. But if the animals were weak, he would not place them there, so that the weak animals went to Laban and the strong ones to Jacob. What Jacob is practicing here is pretty scientific. We call it selective breeding, meaning you take a strong animal with another strong animal. As they meet, they will produce a strong baby. So that's the basic thinking. To a certain extent, it is true with horses, with cows. That's what we do. So Jacob separated his strong ones and he made them together. The weak ones, he put them to Laban's flock. And in the end, we know Laban ended up with the weak ones. We can call this, in human terms, dating agency. Isn't it? Some of us go to this dating agency and then they will match you compatibility, so to speak. But we do know that it is also not true all the time. In Singapore, we try get two highly educated men and women, get them to get married, give them incentives, they get married, the child they produce, are they of university kind of a quality? Usually not true. Right? Let me give you a bit of a facts about sheep can reproduce when they're 6 months old. 6 months old. And the gestation period, that means the period they carry the baby, 5 months. Meaning, before their first birthday, they can become a mother. And they average 2 births a year. You multiply that, you can see how they can multiply so quickly, right? Within 6 months, they are already a child. So over time, Jacob raised a flock of speckled, spotted, see. And they were all very strong. These were strong and healthy. But Laban was left holding perfect sheep and goats but wicked ones. In this way, verse 43 tells us, the man, Jacob, grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. Wow. Verse 43 tells us he became exceedingly prosperous. Even when compared to Uncle Laban, he's now so much richer. Despite Uncle Laban's trick, when he removed the speckled spotted stripe, despite of all the superstitious and the mystical practices of Jacob, Jacob could have killed all he liked with all the sticks. And what Jacob did was nothing more than superstitious practices. Just the same with Rachel's mandrake. Do you remember? Rachel asked for the mandrakes. And did it help her? No, it did not. Because all this had nothing to do with what is going on here. And if some of us still think that Jacob is some super shepherd, very experienced, and that he knows something that we don't, then you ask yourself again, how did Jacob get this sheep or goat or cow to mate on cue? That means when he snaps his finger, they will mate. No, he couldn't. It's not like in a human being, you can set up a romantic table with candlelight and then you have two of them sit there and talk to each other and then they fell in love. It doesn't happen this way. Because later on, we're going to learn that Jacob couldn't even get his own children to date girls he wanted, he thought good for his son. Now, there is nothing significant about what we've read today about the sticks and the mandrakes. The question you may want to ask is, why then would God put all these accounts in the Bible and pick up space? Because I always believe that when God puts something there, he has a reason. What is this reason? And it is this. It is to show us that in spite of all the many ridiculous things we do and thinking that God needs our help, the truth is God doesn't. God doesn't. This passage has caused so much confusion and speculation, thinking that the sticks from different types of trees had some medicinal property. No. Was it some form of magic or trickery? There is an important part of this story that many of us know, but we will learn of it in our next study, in chapter 31. And it only goes to show to us that it doesn't even matter what Jacob thought of what he did, because Jacob absolutely had no clue about genetics. All he knew was that something supernatural was happening. That's all he knew. And you and I need to know that it is God. It is God who's in control. He's sovereign. And he made Jacob very rich. Why? To fulfill his promise he made to Jacob earlier in chapter 28. Like God said, I will bless you. God kept his promise. But we have a bit of a problem here. Now that Jacob became very wealthy and he was able even to purchase donkeys and camels and even servants. Wow, he must be something. And we also remembered how Jacob's grandfather, Abraham, who disobeyed God and went into Egypt and lied about Sarah, and then he returned a rich man. He returned a rich man because Pharaoh asked him to leave and gave him a lot of money. And here today, we see this thing repeating itself in the life of Jacob. Because when he left Canaan to Haran, he had nothing more than a staff, a stick in his hand. But today he's super rich. All because he committed a sin. All because he committed a sin. Now he's going to return to Canaan, blessed and a rich man. Why? How can you profit? How can a man profit from his sin? That question is tough, but you need to realize that there are two parts to it. The first part is God is sovereign. And being sovereign, God can work around the sins of Abraham, the sins of Isaac, and the sins of Jacob. He is sovereign. But we must never forget the second part. The second part is this. All three men suffered the consequences of their sin. Abraham did, Isaac did, and soon we're going to see Jacob suffering for the consequences of his sin. And going back to the first part, that God being sovereign, and He can work around their sin and our sin. But more particularly in the case of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, it was to bring about the fulfillment of His great redemption plan. His great redemption plan. And you and I have gone through this many times, but you need to remember this all the time. That everything that we see in Genesis, in the book of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, all the way to Revelation, it is about this. It is about the Abrahamic covenant being fulfilled, starting with Abraham. God gave him a land, the land. And of course, symbolically, we saw how Abraham bought a piece of land from Ephron, the Hittite, for a burial ground for Sarah. That symbolically marks the beginning of the transfer of ownership from the Canaanites to the descendants of Abraham. Genesis chapter 25, verse 9 tells us his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him, meaning Abraham, in the cave of Machpelah and near Mamre, in the field of Ephron, son of Zohar, the Hittite. This is the first part of the Abrahamic covenant. Then after that, God gave Abraham only one son, Isaac, who became the father of Esau and Jacob. Jacob was chosen. That's the second part, to become the father of 12 tribes. This 12 tribes will form the people, the promise of the people. Now we have the land and the people, which is the second part. And finally, we are now seeing how through Jacob, he's going to have 12 sons. And from one of those 12 sons, from the tribe of Judah, will come the Messiah. And he alone will become the blessing to the whole world. The blessing to the whole world. That's the third part. God is sovereign. We've talked about this. What does it mean when we say He is sovereign? Meaning His plan, His redemption plan, cannot be derailed. It can be frustrated. It can be delayed, but it cannot be frustrated. Cannot be derailed. Jesus came 2,000 years ago, went to the cross, died, buried, and he rose again on the third day. And he is coming again. Today, the great redemption plan of God is about to be completed. We're living in the last days. And the rapture will happen soon, followed by the tribulation, ending with the second coming of Jesus. Then the millennium would begin. And at the end of the millennium, at the end of the 1,000 years, the world as we know it today will end. It will go up in a great ball of fire. It's going to happen soon. Meantime, what about you and I? What are we to do? And it is this. Jesus himself said to us, you and I, that we are to be a part of his great redemption plan. We have to sit at his feet and learn from him first, to hear his voice. Then you can serve like Martha. Sit like Mary, then you will get a Martha. And today, you and I, we are called to be his witnesses, to be disciple makers in God's plan. You can frustrate God's plan for your life by being disobedient. That's your choice. You will end life with regrets. What is it that Jesus wanted from you and I? And these are his last words when he was on planet Earth to all of us. He said in Mark chapter 16, verse 15, he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, to every creature. We're called to preach the gospel. And Matthew 28, verses 19, we'll memorize this. Go ye therefore and teach all nations. In the NASB, it reads, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I commanded you. And lo, I'm with you always, even to the end of the world. This is the command. It was never a suggestion. Oh, if you are free, please will you go out and preach the gospel whenever you feel like it. Can you go and preach the gospel? It wasn't how it was said. It was a command that would give us meaning, purpose, and excitement in our lives. Having preached, and that anyone believing, we are to make disciples of them. To get baptized, they must be taught to observe. All of you coming to this church, that's what we do here. We are discipling you. If you don't like it, you can find another church where you can sit and nobody will tell you what. You can do as you please. But I'm telling you, this is what Jesus has taught all of us. And there will be times when I will say some things that you may not like. But that's all part of discipleship. And today we have to decide, make a decision. What are you going to do with the commands of Jesus? Go make disciples. Go preach. Go make. I'm so excited. And quite a number of you are doing it on your own. Last week we had our Christmas service. Some of you even printed leaflets We went out distributing around the neighborhood. Some of you are talking to your friends, your neighbors. Wait, continue. Because that's what Jesus has called all of us.